Jesus said, "What father among you, if his son asked him for a fish, would hand him a snake? Or if his daughter asked him for an egg, would give her a scorpion?" Well, the answer to that is no father would do that. But what about this? What if a father had a son who asked him for a bubblegum peppermint ice cream cone, but the father knew he really needed and wanted a chocolate chip? Or if his daughter demanded that she have a vanilla ice cream cone when the father knew that what she really wanted was a Rocky Road and licorice? Well, in that case, it takes a really wise father to know what to do.
Tom, 11 years old, is the first in the door at 31 Flavors. He announced to everyone in the store,
"I get the window on the way home."
Alice, the oldest at 13, followed. She is somewhere between dolls and nylons and looks like she'd rather be anywhere but where she was. Next, Janet, who was 9, was shoved through the door by Jeff, who was aggressively 8. Next came the biggest of the group, a man by the name of Daddy, who was holding the hand of the smallest of the group, a boy by the name of Paul. They all lined up in front of the plate glass wonderland.
"Whatever you want."
His arms spread out, indicating all 31 flavors.
I want a scoop of Rocky Road and licorice in a cup.
Daddy, that's what I was gonna get. I told Jeff in the car that I was gonna get that, and that's why I got it.
"Janet, honey, I'm sure there's enough for 2.
She glared at her father. Meanwhile, Tom conned the teenage girl behind the counter into giving him a taste of pralines and cream and double chocolate.
"Tom!"
It was only one word, but the communication was unmistakable. They'd had this conversation before.
Daddy, I'd like 2 scoops of lime sherbet in a cup.
She got her sherbet and drifted away from her embarrassing family to a group of teenagers in a corner.
Daddy!
"Yes?"
I want bubblegum peppermint.
"Don't get bubblegum peppermint. You like chocolate chip."
But I want bubblegum peppermint.
"Okay, but are you going to finish it?"
Father turned back to Janet, who was pouting in a corner.
"Janet, what would you like?"
Vanilla.
Her voice was cold as ice cream.
Boy, this Rocky Road and licorice sure is good.
"Jeff!"
It was the same one-word conversation the father had had with Tom. Jeff walked away.
"Janet, honey, don't cut off your nose to spite your face. Get the Rocky Road and licorice."
She looked at her father as if he were the dumbest man in the whole world. He knew nothing about life.
Vanilla. In a plain cone.
She would not be denied the wrong done to her. Tom was pacing up and down in front of the glassed-in choices.
"You'll have to make up your mind."
All right. I'll have a hot fudge banana split with 4 scoops of ice cream. Chocolate chip, double chocolate, and chocolate ripple.
"No extra nuts?"
Oh, yeah, extra nuts.
"And 2 maraschino cherries for my son."
Added the father of ice cream.
Daddy, I don't like this bubblegum peppermint.
"Give it to me, Paul. And get him a single scoop of chocolate chip in a plain cone."
The father licked the bubblegum peppermint. He didn't like it either. Then, out of the wealth of his pockets, the father paid for it all. He was herding his children out the door when Alice, his oldest, said,
Daddy, I'd like to stay with these kids I met.
he looked over at the teenagers in the corner with that steely parental appraisal that withers all wrongdoing.
"Okay,
He was startled by the tenderness in his voice.
but be home by 5.
From outside, Tom's voice could be heard.
"I get the window on the way back."
The father turned immediately and pushed out the door. for his children needed him.
What do you think? Is the father in this story too permissive? How do you think he felt about leaving his oldest daughter at the ice cream parlor? Also, a story like this can evoke memories. Did it evoke any memories of your own about your children or your parents? Certainly when Jesus told the story of the Father who gives good things, he had in mind God the Father. What does this story tell you about God? Jesus entered a village and was welcomed at the house of a woman named Martha. Martha had a sister named Mary, and she sat at the feet of the Lord and listened intently. Martha was busy about all the details of hospitality, and when she saw Mary at the feet of Jesus, she said to him, "Lord, are you not concerned that my sister has left all the household tasks to me?" Jesus said to her, "Martha, Martha, you are busy about many things, but only one thing is required." Then the story ends. We are not told what the one thing that is required. Perhaps we can find out what it is from a contemporary Martha.
Martha is good as a butter cookie.
The Good Samaritan could take lessons from her.
If someone is sick, she's the first down the block with a meal and chatter.
If you need anything, just let me know.
She means it. And her mothering is never neglected. After dinner, with the dishes cleared, she sits
With her two daughters at the kitchen table and helps them with their homework. She guides Janet through the maze of algebra.
Next, she listens to Alice, her fifth grader, spell the ever-elusive
B-O-U-Q-U-U-E-T.
When the girls are finished and off in their own rooms,
she joins her husband before the television set. Martha's husband, Tom, is proud of her. He basks in her goodness. And she likes it when she can feel him feeling good about her. It gives her the support she needs to go on. Martha is also socially concerned. She deplores media hype, government lies, big business ploys. She cannot understand the cruelty and apathy everyone seems to take for granted. At the center of it all, she tells whoever will listen, is rampant self-interest.
No one cares for anyone but themselves.
Martha to the rescue.
Well, it's true.
She is determined she will not be that way. Now, Martha's parish staffs a soup kitchen in the downtown district. The name of that kitchen is Nazareth. One night a week, Martha and her eldest daughter go down there and prepare soup and sandwiches for whoever comes in off the street. While the street people are eating, mother and daughter straighten up in the kitchen and then head right for home. On their social action night, Tom cooks and has dinner waiting for them. The conversation usually goes the same way.
How many tonight?
About 10.
It's a good work.
Oh, it's little enough.
It's a lot.
I feel sorry for them.
You should.
I guess so.
On Tuesday night at 11:30, the doorbell rang.
Who could that be at this hour? Oh, my God.
Martha put on her robe and joined her husband downstairs at the front door. It was Tom's father. The last time they had seen him was at the wedding 17 years ago. He was drunk then, too.
Martha, honey.
Tom's father smiled and gave Martha a big hug. But liquor had wasted him. When he grinned, all the bones in his face showed. The first night, he slept on the couch. By the end of the week, the den had been turned into a temporary bedroom. He would sleep away the days and prowl the nights. Whatever liquor was in the house always disappeared.
Gee, Mom, we've got our own personal street person.
It was Alice, the youngest, who said it. Martha was not amused.
Tom, how long is he going to stay?
He's my father. I can't just throw him out. Give me time.
A month passed, and Tom had not found the time. One night at supper, after the girls had left the table, the family street person said,
That Janet of yours is really growing into a ripe young woman.
That night in bed, Martha said,
He has to go.
As soon as I can.
Tom turned toward the wall. 2 days later, they found Tom's father on the floor in the den. The ambulance got him to the hospital on time. His heart attack was not fatal. But he had no insurance. Tom and Martha dug into their savings for a 2-week hospital stay. When he was released, they rearranged the den into a permanent sick room. Then Martha the Good became a full-time nurse to a cranky, unappreciative, foul-mouthed old man. One afternoon from his bed he yelled,
God damn it, Martha, bring me a beer!
In the kitchen, Martha stood perfectly still. Her voice was a whispered monotone, but her ears heard what her mouth said.
God, I hope the son of a bitch dies.
Her whole heart was in every word. It was as if she had caught God in one of those rare moments when God had nothing to do but listen. And as a reward for Martha's years of goodness, God tickled her father-in-law's heart into thrombosis and left her staring into the coffin with her answered prayer, wondering how she would ever get back into the garden now that she had moved so far east of Eden. The day of the funeral was also Martha's social action night.
Stay at home tonight.
I'm going.
She and Janet opened Nazareth and prepared the soup and the sandwiches. But she did not clean the kitchen as the street people ate. For some reason she still does not understand, she sat at a table with a bowl of soup. Tears came with the first taste and did not stop. But she finished the soup like a medicine that she had long avoided.
You okay, Mom?
The words came out slow, with audible sighs between them, the result of some interior labored birth.
Next week, we'll bring flowers for the tables. Maybe your father and your sister will come with us. We'll all eat at Nazareth.
Why do you think that Martha drank the soup like a medicine she had long avoided? Who have been the personal street persons in your life, and how have you reacted to them? In the scriptural story, we know that only one thing is required, but we do not know what it is. Having heard the contemporary story of Martha, what do you think the one thing that is required is? This is a paraphrase of a parable that Jesus told from the Gospel of Mark. A man went out to sow seed upon the ground. The seed went into the ground, and even while you sleep, the seed breaks the earth. And even while you sleep, the seed that breaks the earth becomes a stalk. And even while you sleep, the stalk sprouts an ear. And even while you sleep, in the ear, the wheat ripens and the sickle waits. That story of Jesus seems to suggest that there is some secret hidden power at work in human life. And that secret hidden power can take some very delightful forms, like a small girl by the name of Patricia.
Patricia plants pennies. She lives on Farmer Avenue. It is called Farmer Avenue because years ago it was the road the farmers took into town to sell their produce. Oh, it used to be a popular road. The adults would pull up their wagons over to the side and talk, catching up on news, hugging friends not seen for some time, and making dates and deals. The children would run and play in the fields and then sneak up behind the wagons and snitch apples and pears, carrots and tomatoes. Going to town was an excuse for a picnic. But time and the new highway changed all that. Now Farmer Avenue is a quiet, tree-lined residential section. Its only traffic is a morning and evening rush hour flow of men and women trying to catch or trying to escape from the buses which stopped at the corner. These hassled, unsuspecting people are the special subjects of Patricia's ministrations. Patricia is 10, and the initial burst of summer excitement at being out of school has faded. Although she fills her days with baseball and swimming, and her nights with rock tapes, and as much time as she can with Tim Fremont, who is a grade ahead of her in school, she is bored, like totally. But her mother has put a lid on it. Young lady, I don't want to hear you say one more time that you're bored. So, Patricia would lock the bathroom door and drone into the sympathetically listening mirror, boring, boring, boring. Well, it was in this sorry state of soul that she began drawing arrows on the sidewalk. She started one house down from her own, and with a large yellow chalk, she scratched out an arrow and attached the message, "Treasure ahead." Then 3 sidewalk squares later, another arrow with the same message. Then directly in front of her house, the arrow pointed sideways and the message changed to "Treasure near." Now, any eyes interested enough to follow the chalk arrow would see a large, very old oak tree that grew in the middle of Patricia's front yard. The trunk of the tree had split just 4 feet from the ground. In the flat space of that split, shiny as a newborn baby, lay a penny. From the window of her room on the 2nd floor, Patricia could see it all. No 2 people reacted exactly the same way. Some just stomped on by like they never even noticed the signs they were stepping on. Others briefly glanced down, but were in too much of a hurry to follow the leads. Some hesitated. Their eyes followed the arrow to the tree, but then their no-nonsense feet took them to the bus. Some stood on the sidewalk for a while, then tiptoed tiptoed across the grass toward the tree. When they found the penny in the nook, they flipped it up in the air with a laugh and pocketed it. One man picked it up, examined it like a rare coin collector, and put it back. Each morning and evening, Patricia would watch them and pray that the hurriers would stop. And the stoppers would seek, and the seekers would find, and the finders would rejoice, and she would get to sneak out of the house and plant another penny in the tree. The sheer stealth of it all delighted her so much that she completely abandoned her mirror conversations. Now, Patricia's favorite was a thin young man. He wore a three-piece suit and carried a brown attaché case, but that didn't fool her. She knew that as minute he got home from work, he put on cutoffs and a T-shirt and shot baskets before dinner. Well, the first day, he strolled on by, not to be bothered. The second day, he read the signs on the sidewalk. The third day, he glanced at the tree. The fourth day, he walked very slowly, genuflected to tie his shoelace, looked around to see who was watching, and then kept on going. The fifth day, he ran by. He needs help, thought Patricia, and so she put her not inconsiderable mind to it. In fact, it was what she was pondering right before bed when she looked out her window and saw a figure on the sidewalk. The blend of the street lights and the leafy branches of the tree covered the figure in shadows, but she could see it was the thin young man in cutoffs and a T-shirt. She threw open her window and thundered, "Go for it!" The young man stiffened as if he had been completely drenched by a storm he did not see coming. He turned and bolted down the sidewalk. "I'll have to try something else," thought Patricia out loud to whoever might be listening. "But make no mistake, I'm gonna get him."
Why do you think the young man ran away when Patricia shouted, "Go for it"? Also, on the sidewalks of your life, what have been some of the arrows which you have followed? And finally, Jesus seems to suggest that this secret power will ultimately prevail. What do you think the connection is between that and Patricia's confidence that I'll get him yet? What good can happen at a grocery store the day before Thanksgiving? The lines will be too long. They'll be out of the food that you want. The prices will be too high. But at least one good thing can happen if you heed Jesus' advice and let the children come unto you.
Big Jerry groaned when his wife told him he had to
Go to the store.
It was the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, and the grocery store would be Grand Central Station. But when he heard one of the missing ingredients was
Cranberry sauce.
He nodded reluctantly. How could you forget cranberry sauce? But when his wife yelled from the upstairs bedroom,
Take little Jerry with you.
he knew how she could forget cranberry sauce. This was all part of a bigger plot. Lately, Big Jerry's wife had been on his case. He
Wasn't spending enough time with his son.
He
Needs you, Gerard.
always Gerard when there was a lesson to be given.
Just because he's gotten older, that doesn't mean you two have to be so far apart. He's only 11, you know.
Always, you know, when she thought he didn't know. Big Jerry did not like these lectures. They always made him feel as though he was a bit of a fool, and anyone who had done as well in business as he had was no fool. Big Jerry stuck his head into the den. Want to go to the store?
Little Jerry buttoned the television off and was at his father's heels.
Big Jerry knew that tomorrow Little Jerry's mother would probe.
What did you and little Jerry talk about when you went to the store? She was hoping for something significant, like the facts of life or the value of a buck.
So, Big Jerry tried to get a conversation going. How's school?
Okay.
How's your basketball team doing?
Lousy.
What were you watching on TV?
A movie.
This is normal, Big Jerry thought to himself. This is normal. At the grocery store, the cranberry sauce was scooped up. They also found
The lettuce,
nuts,
Diet Coke,
pie crust mix,
rolls,
orange juice,
and something called nutmeg.
As they turned out of the last aisle, they saw
The people.
The line at the under 10 checkout counter was over 10 people long. Grand Central Station.
What?
A lot of people.
Oh, yeah.
The checker was a teenage boy, and he was carrying on a conversation with the neighboring checker, a teenage girl. It was about a party both had been to, and both hated.
To Big Jerry's ears, every other word was
boring.
And
really?
More work and less talk, Big Jerry thought to himself. He noticed the other people in line giving each other exasperated looks. Big Jerry began to mumble under his breath. By the time they got to the front of the line, Big Jerry was steaming. But he said nothing. He simply put a $50 bill on the counter.
The checker, happily gabbing away, rang up a $19.35 charge.
When Big Jerry saw how much it was, he picked up the 50 and put down a 20.
The checker did not notice the switch and gave him $30.65 in change.
Big Jerry hesitated. This kid deserves to be taken.
Little Jerry was at his side.
I gave you a 20.
No, you didn't. You gave me a 50.
I gave you a 20.
I saw the 50.
Look in the drawer.
The checker checked. Oh, yeah. He took all but the 65 cents back.
Later in the car, someone who had witnessed the whole event came up behind Big Jerry and his son. You should have taken that jerk for the 30.
But little Jerry said to his father, "That was neat, Dad." And then he began to talk about school, about the basketball team, about that movie he'd been watching on TV.
Big Jerry tried to listen, but he didn't hear very much. For 3 insights in rapid succession raked his mind.
If little Jerry had not been there, he would have grabbed the 30 and walked.
And his wife was wrong. Little Jerry didn't need him.
He needed little Jerry.
And he was glad tomorrow was Thanksgiving.
Why do you think Big Jerry was glad it was the day before Thanksgiving? And how about yourself? Have you ever been in the presence of a younger person and that presence made you a better person? If you have, describe what happened. And finally, in the light of the story, why do you think Jesus recommended that we let the little children come unto us? Helping is not as easy as it looks. Everyone says you have to have the right intention. Your heart has to be in the right place. You have to put yourself into it. But it seems that helping takes more than that. In a little-known saying of Jesus that is not in the Gospels as we have them, Jesus is walking along and he sees a man working in the field. And he says, "Man, if you know what you are doing, you are blessed. But if you do not know what you are doing, you are cursed." The suggestion seems to be that in order to help, we must know what we are doing, even if all we are doing is trying to feed a little white bread to some ducks.
From April to October, every evening at 5, the ducks arrived. By 7, they were gone.
Here come the ducks.
Tom, who lived in the 3rd floor center section of the condominium, made this announcement every evening.
They're Canadian geese, dear.
Just in time for cocktails.
The ducks could be seen at a distance in the sky. They looked as if they were coming in on the clouds. They flew in perfect squadron formation and landed in
the drink,
with honks and oots congratulating one another on their successful arrival.
The drink
was a body of water which was the centerpiece of the condominium complex. Now, it was too little to be called a lake and too big to be called a pond. So the people called it
the drink.
Now, 3 buildings of 7 stories each surrounded the drink, cupping it like a pair of hands. Willows wept along the bank. Now, each apartment in the 3 buildings had a balcony which overlooked the drink. And most of the people gathered on their balconies every evening at 5 to have a pre-dinner cocktail and greet their evening visitors from the sky.
The ducks were everybody's guests.
Now, once the ducks had landed, they paddled about in different directions like tourists who'd just gotten off a bus. On land, they waddled this way and that, their rear ends doing Mae West imitations. Their presence kept the conversation going.
You should never give a duck a bath. The soap ruins the oil in their feathers, and when they land in the water, they sink and drown.
Do ducks drown?
Why don't you go grab one by the neck, Phyllis, and jam its head on the water and see?
The people fed the ducks bread. They would throw chunks from their balconies into the drink. The ducks would scurry along, their necks stretched out low to the ground, and gobble up the gifts. Their whole bodies would shake as the bread slid down their tunnel.
Do ducks have stomachs?
How do you think they crap?
Well, cows have 2 stomachs.
Then, one evening, the scene changed. One of the ducks was limping.
Look, one of them's hurt.
Now, this got George Wilbur in 3 right off his chair. He leaned over the balcony railing and watched the duck hobbling along.
He doesn't seem to be in pain.
Do ducks cry?
I have to go to the bathroom. Throw the bread to the gimpy duck!
Oh, now, George Wilbur was a take-charge kind of guy. The condominium dwellers obeyed. They threw bread directly in front of the limping duck. But hurry as he might, he could not beat the other ducks to it. He went breadless night after night.
The people were outraged.
The gluttony of the other ducks disgusted them. They all agreed that this was
the animal kingdom at its worst.
Here come the ducks.
Canadian geese, dear.
On Thursday, after a full week of watching that gimpy duck go without bread, George Wilbur decided to skip his cocktail. Phyllis saw him first.
Does George Wilbur know what he's doing?
George Wilbur never knows what he's doing.
Look at him!
George Wilbur was hiding among the hanging branches of one of the weeping willows. He was wearing a pair of winter gloves, and he had a large net in both hands. He looked like a fowler who just escaped from an Old Testament psalm. Now, when the ducks had landed on the water, the entire building leaned over the balcony railings and watched in silence. Once on land, the ducks began their mindless bobbing stroll. Shh! The gimp. The gimp made his appearance. George, his first toss, missed, and the ducks hopped and ran and flew, but on his second toss, the net pulled it perfectly through the air and snared the limping duck.
Gotcha, you son of a gun!
George carefully scooped him up there from behind, and the duck went peacefully.
I'm taking him to the vet.
Good for you, George. That's right.
Well, they kept the duck in the utility room in Sick Center overnight, and some of the women came with bread soaked in milk, and that gimpy duck guzzled greedily.
Do ducks get fat? Like, overweight?
In the morning, George Wilbur put on his winter gloves, placed the duck in a large cardboard box with air holes poked in it, loaded the box in the back of his station wagon, and went to the vet. He sat in the waiting room, proud that he'd cared enough to do something. After a half hour, the veterinarian returned, and he told George, you were right. This duck has a very bad leg. The cartilage is rotting away. Some damn fools have been feeding him too much white bread.
How would you characterize the people in the condominium? Have you personally ever been fed too much white bread? How did you react? The suggestion of Jesus is that in order to help, we must know what we are doing. Have you ever been involved in a helping project that didn't know what it was doing? A certain man had 2 sons. So begins one of Jesus's most popular and most powerful parables. It is often called the parable of the prodigal son, but really the focus is on the father who himself is prodigal, pouring himself out, doing whatever he can to hold his warring family together. Let's listen to all 3 of them.
I have 2 sons, and neither of them wants me for a father, so they make me into the father they want. One makes me a pimp for his belly.
What a feast my father throws. Oh, belly, we're back. No more watch and rumble while the swine swill and snort, and I bite through my lip and drool for a munch on one of their carob pods. But a love slap on their unclean rumps. They made me remember my own troth. Daddy.
The other one counts my kisses, he wants me to count his. For 2 days plowing, take this hug. For a plentiful harvest, receive this blessing.
All those days, all those harvests, all those years. He would not even look at me as he told me the news.
Your brother is home. I have killed the fatted calf because I have him home safe and sound.
He has had me home all these years, and no music ever greeted me as I dragged in from the fields.
I rehearsed a speech, a mumble masterpiece, with mouth turned down, eye full of mist, repentant as a whore with clap. I whimper. Father, I have sinned against heaven.
Father, I have sinned against heaven.
And against thee.
And against thee.
Daddy, your little boy has done wrong, and he's so sorry. Really, he is. But do not take me back as a son.
But do not take me back as a son.
Take me back as a hired hand.
Take me back as a hired hand.
But take me back. My belly and I do beg you, large, larded, stuffed, saddlebagged, wine-drenched old daddy. Grovel a little to guzzle a lot. Crawl on your belly to feed it. That's my philosophy.
He thinks he tricks me into concessions, cons a calf from a sentimental old fool. He credits my dancing to his piping.
I always was his favorite. Could make him dance to any tune I piped.
But the music I hear has another source. He is always empty, so my fullness is hidden from him. His cunning gives him no rest, so my peace eludes him. The other one is so unsure of himself he cannot share my assurance. He lives by measuring what he does not have. And I, anywhere else, is an I lost to him. He thinks I take him for granted, but I lean on him like a staff.
All those mornings, with him coughing up his night phlegm and complaining of the cold, and me throwing a blanket around his bones and sitting him in a bench on the sun. All those days with him wandering off in the opposite direction of wherever I was, growing weary from watching for the one who does not come. And me looking up from the earth to see his back blocking the sky. All those mornings.
He thinks I take him for granted. He is the privileged companion of my morning pain and evening praise.
All those nights.
I would allow no one else to see the stumble of my memory, the embarrassment of my body.
All those years.
The old man upstaged me. He fell upon me in mid-sentence and ruined my clever act. But the script was magic. Robe, ring, sandals suddenly appear, and this feast falls from heaven. It was like I was, what can I say,
a long-lost son, a dead man come back to life.
Long-lost son, dead man come back to life.
He secretly seizes in the night what I freely offer in the day. He wants a father he can steal from. Instead, he has me, a vine with more wine than he can drink.
Your brother is home.
Long-lost son.
And I have killed the fatted calf.
Come back to life.
Because I have him home safe and sound.
A long-lost son.
Home safe and sound.
Come back to life. What about all those harvests? With me giddy as a child who had found a coin, yelling for him to come, see the hundredfold crop and the sagging vines, and him coming and sighing like the wheat was dust and the grapes were rocks. All those nights with him nodding over his food and droning a prayer and forgetting to bless me before bed, and me waiting for the embrace he was saving, hoping for the words he was hoarding, eager for an unfeigned arm around my shoulder, for a kiss strong enough to bring blood to my cheek. Now, he tells me, all these years we've been together, we have become one.
You have been with me always, and all I have is yours.
I need more, Father. I need you to run to me, heart bursting and out of breath. Not as you are now, with your sensible, now see here logic about the fittingness of feasting for someone else. All those days, all those harvests, all those years.
He credits my love to his loyalty. He wants a father indebted to him, paying him back in affection for his back-breaking labor. Instead, he has me, an ancient tree with its own soil. He does not understand that he cannot calm his panic with a bargain. There will be no chain between us. I freely tie my wrist to his. I have 2 sons.
Do not take me back as a son.
You have had me home all these years.
Wherever they are, I go to meet them. I am their father. But I am who I am. Let them be who they will be.
What images from the speech of the younger son stick in your memory? Or what images from the speech of the older brother stick in your memory? How do you personally react when the father says, I am who I am. Let them be who they will be. Jesus said, you cannot tell when the reign of God is coming by careful watching. If they tell you, lo, it comes over there, or lo, it comes over there, do not believe them. The kingdom of God is in your midst. But if that is so, the question persists. If it is in our midst, where is it? We may be looking in the wrong place. The stargazer is.
Since his daughter was only 3 and too young to buy him a Father's Day gift, he purchased one for himself. The telescope was magnificent. It was a Discover Deluxe. It had 3 lenses building up to 227 magnification. It had a counterbalanced equatorial mounting and included a diagonal prism, sun projector, and SLR reflex finder scope. The salesman even threw in an accessory tray. Mounted on a tripod next to the window, it was aimed like a rifle at the stars. Every night after dinner, the owner pasted his eye to the viewfinder and scanned the heavens for movement, excited at the patterns of light 1,000,000 miles over his head. At his feet, his daughter played.
In the story, the father, for Father's Day, bought himself a telescope. What gift would you buy him? Have you ever been a stargazer? If so, describe that experience. And finally, if the kingdom of God is in our midst, where specifically is it? Stay in shape. Keep jogging. If you do, things will go right. One time, some people came to Jesus and they told him about a time when things did not go right. Pilate had killed some people and he had mixed their blood in with the sacrifices. But when they told Jesus this, he discerned something in their attitude that perhaps he didn't like. And so he said to them, "Do you think that these people were the greatest sinners in all of Galilee because they suffered this? By no means." And then Jesus went on to say, "And about those 18 people who died when the tower fell on them in Siloam, do you think that happened because they were great sinners? By no means." Jesus seems to be saying that we are not responsible for being mortal. But that's okay. Don't worry about it. Just keep jogging.
Al died jogging, and his friends knew why.
You don't start to jog when you're 53.
I read somewhere once that you're supposed to start off walking fast and then just gradually build up to jogging.
Let's face it, Al's whole lifestyle was heart attack material. He was a compulsive overachiever. Why, I don't think he'd had a real vacation in over a year.
True. Now that they had buried Al with blame, the future opened endless before these three pilgrims, as long as they were cautious.
Al's friends are very zealous in trying to find causes for his death. Why would that be? In the scripture quote, Jesus sees a tendency in us to blame people for the misfortunes that befall them. Have you ever seen that going on? If so, describe what happened. Jesus once told a parable about the kingdom of God is like a good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, will they pour into the folds of your garment. It is meant as an image of abundance, and what will pour into the folds of your garment is wheat. But then again, Jesus didn't know about popcorn.
With the possible exception of the Leonardo da Vinci Airport in Rome during a ground crew strike, the popcorn counter at the Varsity Theater 5 minutes before showtime is the most hassled place on earth. Behind the 20-foot plate glass counter scurries a young teenage girl. She is alone, struggling to respond to 50 pressing patrons, racing up and down the counter, dipping for Raisinets, diving to fill a popcorn box, jamming a cup under the Coke dispenser. Her long blonde hair is tied up in a ponytail behind her head. And when she turns suddenly to help a customer, it lifts off her head like a kite. Standing in line is Robert, known affectionately among his other members of the football team as Cro-Magnon Man. When Robert approaches the front line of the customers, he says 2 words. They sound as if they were uttered into a canyon. Large popcorn! The young girl, frazzled, scoops up the popcorn and slams it into a tub box and moves on. But with the hard contact on the counter, the popcorn, which appeared to fill the box, caves in. There was a false bottom of air. Now, only 2/3 of the box of popcorn stares up at Cro-Magnon Man. A sound emits from Robert, a primitive, guttural cry of pain, as if the tusk of a wild boar stabbed into his leg. The patrons turn in terror, sure the end is upon them. The counter girl stops in her tracks, looks around her, and immediately sizes up the situation. She grabs a popcorn scoop, fills it with popcorn, and upturns it over Bob's popcorn box. It fills the box with popcorn, brims over, falls on the counter and onto the floor. Here, monster, the girl says, laughing. Robert emits one more sound, a low, soft purr of pleasure, as if someone infinitely larger than he was had reached down and petted him.
What do you think changed Robert's voice from a guttural cry of pain to a low purr of pleasure? And how about for yourself? Have you ever been afraid you were not going to get what was coming to you? How did you react? Or on the other hand, have you gotten much more than you expected? How did you react? Jesus took a little child and put him in their midst. He put his arms around him and he said, "Whoever welcomes a child such as this welcomes me. And whoever welcomes me welcomes not me, but the one who sent me." This little story from the scriptures is oftentimes seen as idyllic, Jesus cuddling a child, even sentimental. But welcoming a child may be trickier business than it looks like. It can be filled with many surprises. At least, that is what the cigar smoker found out.
The kingdom of God is like a cigar smoker without his cigar. The cigar smoker was giving a workshop in Los Angeles. It began in glory and ended in humiliation. At the close, people were grumbling, and his departure was more in the nature of an escape. As the cab dragged through the traffic to the airport, he thought to himself, "If only I can get to the airport, get on the plane, nurse a double martini, eat whatever lousy food the plane is serving, and smoke my cigar, everything will be all right." For this was many years ago, when cigar smoking was allowed on planes. For the first time in 3 days, there were no hitches. The cigar smoker got to the airport, got on the plane, and plunked himself down in an aisle seat in the smoking section.
Next to him was a little girl about 4 years old. She had with her everything little girls have on airplanes.
A bag of half-eaten corn chips, a coloring book with a box of broken crayons, and a doll.
Mussed up from lots of hugging and squeezing.
In the window seat sat the little girl's mother.
Los Angeles, as usual, was socked in, a mixture of fog and smog.
As the plane left the ground, it entered the thick gray clouds.
The cabin darkened.
But as the plane climbed, the cabin grew progressively lighter until the dazzling moment the plane broke out of the clouds into the sun. The captain turned off the no smoking sign.
The woman in the window seat lit up a cigarette.
When the cigar smoker saw her, his heart sank.
As she exhaled, she waved her hand back and forth in front of her mouth. The smoke wafted upwards and drifted toward the front of the cabin.
The cigar smoker instantly knew what this meant. This woman was going to smoke her cigarette with no smoke going into the little girl's eyes. The cigar smoker also knew that when he lights up his cigar,
smoke would swirl through the cabin,
infiltrate the cockpit,
and seep out into the universe. But if he lights up the cigar,
this little girl would be engulfed in smoke.
She would be coughing her pathetic little girl cough.
People would be staring angrily at him.
He would be the bad guy of all times.
The cigar smoker folded his arms and allowed the injustice of it all full reign over his soul. His thoughts boiled. Did he not get a seat in the smoking section?
He did.
Do they allow you to smoke cigars in the smoking section?
They do. Does he need a cigar?
Oh, sweet Jesus, he needs a cigar! Will he be allowed to smoke the cigar?
He will not.
The cigar smoker sank sullenly into the seat and entertained the idea of locking the little girl in the washroom.
The woman in the window seat finished her cigarette. And then she said to the little girl, "Jennifer, come here." She helped Jennifer slide out of the middle seat into her lap. "Jennifer, look at the clouds."
Jennifer looked out the window of the plane and down at the clouds. Immediately she began to sob in a frightened voice and repeat, "We're upside down! We're upside down!"
The cigar smoker turned toward the noise and coolly observed the little girl's panic. He thought to himself, all these years, this little kid has been standing on the ground looking up at the clouds. Now she is over the clouds looking down. Naturally, she thinks she's upside down. But he decided it was not his place to say anything.
Jennifer's mother was the soul of logic. She said to the little girl, "Jennifer, we're in an airplane. When you're in an airplane, you go up in the air. And when you go up in the air, you go above the clouds. So you see, we're not upside down, we're right side up." And then from the mother's mouth came a conclusion she obviously wasn't willing to admit, but could not avoid. The clouds are upside down.
We're upside down! We're upside down!
The mother pressed the button for the cabin attendant.
And down the aisle came a trained and confident stewardess, prepared for any eventuality. She leaned over the cigar smoker and said in a voice of syrup to the little girl, "What's your name?"
"Jennifer," the little girl whimpered.
"What's the matter, Jennifer?"
"We're upside down! We're upside down!"
"No, we're not, honey," the flight attendant assured her. Then she spoke about her experience of flying and how sometimes she gets afraid too, but that really there is nothing to worry about because the captain knows what he is doing. And that what she often finds helps is some Coca-Cola and some peanuts, and that she was going to get some and bring them right back to her. And then she would see there was no reason to cry. The stewardess retreated down the aisle, smiling.
We're upside down!
Jennifer's mother, leaving reason, resorted to discipline. She picked the little girl up off her lap and firmly placed her back in the middle seat. Sit there and be good.
Jennifer sat there, holding onto her thin little knees and making soft crying noises that anybody with ears to hear could have heard.
The cigar smoker heard and leaned toward the little girl and said, "Jennifer, you are upside down."
The little girl looked up at him in grateful recognition.
"But it's okay, Jennifer," the cigar smoker said. "It's okay."
Jennifer slid over the arm of her chair
and into the cigar smoker's lap. And for one moment,
before her mother could rescue her,
for one dazzling moment, comparable to when an airplane breaks out of the darkened clouds into the sun, the cigar smoker knew he really didn't need the cigar.
At the end of the story, why do you think the cigar smoker realizes he doesn't need his cigar anymore? What about when your world is upside down? What do people do that help you the most? In the scripture story, Jesus says that whoever welcomes a child welcomes him, and whoever welcomes him welcomes God himself. But what do you think it takes to really welcome a child? A young man came up to Jesus and enthusiastically said, "Master, I will follow you wherever you go." Jesus turned and said to him, "Birds have nests, foxes have holes, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head." Following Jesus as a young person is difficult. And as a middle-aged person, it doesn't get any easier. At least that is the opinion of a certain down-and-out disciple.
It was a wind-blasted evening close to midnight in the year of our Lord, 1989, and the door of the apartment was unlocked. Inside, the disciple was eating popcorn and rifling through the Gospels. He was reading at top speed, flipping through the pages, hoping a word, a sentence, a story would make him stop. He was looking for something, but he wasn't sure what it was.
Suddenly, Jesus appeared and sat down in the chair opposite him.
The disciple blanched.
Jesus stubbornly stayed put.
Got anything to eat?
I get it. That's what you did after you rose. When the disciples thought you were a ghost, you asked for something to eat. It reassured them you were real.
I was hungry. What is this stuff?
Popcorn. Here, have some. Lord.
Jesus took one piece of popcorn and looked at it as though he were examining a diamond through an eyepiece.
Wonderful shape. And each one is just a little different. I like them.
The disciple became a little uneasy. He had never heard popcorn referred to as them. And how did he know he liked them if he hadn't tasted them?
Jesus put one piece in his mouth and chewed it carefully for close to a minute.
The disciple grabbed a handful.
Not enough salt.
Salt's not good for you.
Oh, I was always one for a lot of salt. Hey!
Jesus raised a finger in the air like he was about to give a teaching.
Has anyone tried putting butter on this stuff?
It's been done. Butter's not good for you either.
You are a very careful person.
Thanks. Here, have some more.
No, thanks.
You're the only person I know who can eat just one piece of popcorn and stop.
Of course. I'm God. How come when you eat popcorn, you try to get as much into your mouth as possible, and it spills out and you have to pick it off your shirt and put it back in your mouth?
Oh, God, I knew this was going to happen.
Why does everybody say that when I'm around? What did you know was going to happen?
You notice everything, and you make remarks.
You don't like to be noticed?
As a matter of fact, I don't.
The disciple closed his eyes. When he opened them, Jesus was still there and smiling.
Why did you come?
To teach you how to eat popcorn.
Are you going to toy with me?
I'm not toying with you. I always come to seek what is lost. And when people are searching through my story at midnight like it was a medicine cabinet, it usually is a good sign they are lost.
Like hell I'm lost.
Like hell you're not.
Their eyes locked. The disciple was the first to look away.
What can I tell you? It's a mild case of midlife crisis. I'll be over in a couple of months.
Is that what they're calling temptation these days? Midlife crisis?
Slowly, Jesus reached over to the bowl of popcorn, took one piece, and popped it into his mouth. Jesus' obvious enjoyment made the disciple shake his head.
Even God can't eat just one piece of popcorn.
Especially God. Try some.
The disciple instinctively took a handful of popcorn, but then let some fall back into the bowl. He put the pieces into his mouth, 2 and 3 at a time.
When both of them had finished chewing, Jesus said,
You know, you have been with me now a long time. And you're wondering if it's all worth it. You've got your hand on the plow and your head on backwards.
It used to be easy. You died for me. I owed you. So I signed up. But now I ask, who asked you to die for me?
My father, of course.
I never asked you.
You wouldn't. You're the type who doesn't like to be noticed. You would rather die yourself.
Before he could respond, Jesus had a suggestion.
I think you follow me because you like my teachings.
You have got to be kidding. Some of them make sense, most of them I don't get, and all of them are too hard.
Name one.
Anyone who lusts after a woman in his heart has already committed adultery?
Name another. You know, one of the worst times was right after my father raised me. Mary went to the tomb and found 2 angels, but not my body. The angels asked her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" Well, she tells them she doesn't know what's happened to my body and it's driving her crazy with grief. All the while, I'm standing right behind her. She turns and looks right at me. I decided to ape the angels. Woman, I said, why are you weeping? And then I pointed to myself like a little boy on stage and said in a gentle and joyous mockery, who is it that you are looking for? It was a little showy, but I was happy to see her. But then she says, sir? She calls me, sir. That sir killed me a second time. But I realized she didn't recognize me. She thinks that I'm the gardener, and she wants to know if I have any information as to the whereabouts of my own body. I cried out in her pain and mine, Mary! And then she knows me. It was only after I said her name that she found my body. That's what I mean about lust. You know what I mean?
No.
Think about it.
Tell me about your father.
Love to. I was floating on my back in the Sea of Galilee. The water was holding me up effortlessly. It was buoying me up and stretching me out, and as I later reflected on it, it was getting ready to receive me. And I was looking straight up into the sky. No clouds, just a blue so deep it was hard to look at. And then suddenly the sky fell into me. I felt like infinite azure. That was my father, playing around. Have you ever felt like infinite azure?
Sometimes.
Have I ever made you feel like infinite azure?
Not in a long time.
How about finite azure?
Don't mock me.
Definitely limited indigo.
Cut it out.
Look, you are drowning in self-pity. Play with me. I can't take dismal disciples. What are you thinking about?
You tell me. I thought you could read hearts.
Only when the wind is right. Come on. What's going on?
Why don't you just go away?
I told you I can't. I always come to seek what is lost. I'm the Messiah.
The scholars say you didn't use titles for yourself.
You read too much, and you're trying to get me off the subject, like the woman I met at the well.
What's the subject?
You!
Well, did you use titles for yourself?
Is there any mule in your lineage? Okay. Okay, I'll tell you. Back then, people were over-eager to believe in messiahs, so I didn't mention it. Today, people are over-eager not to believe, so I say it. I offended them by not saying it. I see I embarrass you by saying it.
You do not. I'm a believer.
You are an embarrassed believer.
Well, wouldn't you be? Here I am, a modern person looking to a first-century Jew for the meaning of my life. There are a lot of other models around, you know.
Someone a little more in step with the times.
Right.
Like Lee Iacocca.
You're mocking me again.
You are thinking of divorcing me quietly, aren't you?
It's crossed my mind.
My friend, you need more chutzpah. Blessed are they who are not embarrassed by me.
The disciple sat back down at the table.
There were no words for a long time.
There was once a bank robber who planned a heist for a long time. He had all the details worked out and was ready to go. But when he got to the bank teller's window, he suddenly panicked and asked directions to the washroom instead.
Oh, so you're saying I don't carry through with what I set out to do?
I'm saying risk the salt on the popcorn.
Jesus! I'm gonna lay it on the line. You walk too fast. I can't keep up with you.
Better to be out of breath behind me than ahead of everyone else.
I want to be more moderate so I can be a better disciple.
You are a perfect disciple. You cannot receive my debt. You cannot live up to my teachings. My father scares you. And you do not know how to eat popcorn.
That may be accurate, but it's hardly perfect.
My friend, that is the way of the earth beyond the earth. Why live out of something as small as you are? Love me because I'm large enough to betray. But I do not think you are happy in the land of mercy.
God, you are a bittersweet experience.
There is no lie in me.
Why do you say things so harshly?
Peter used to say, I was the only one who could say, I love you, and get everyone mad. You laugh at the right places. So, are you going to stick around?
Where will I go? You have the words of eternal life.
A no fair stealing Peter's line.
Will you stick around someone like me?
Is that what this is all about? You know all things. You know that I love you.
No fair stealing Peter's lines. Why did you say that?
When Peter said it, it blew me away. I hoped it would do the same for you.
But I don't know everything.
You know enough.
I know that even when I want you to go away, I don't want you to go away.
East of Eden. We call that love.
Tears began to run freely down the master's face.
In imitation of his master, the disciple cried.
For a long time, there were no words, only the silence of communication.
You know, after Lazarus came back to life, he told me that what woke him up in the tomb was the sound of my tears.
I can believe that.
Jesus smiled and reached for a third piece of popcorn.
The disciple also took a piece.
Jesus closed his eyes to savor better.
The faithful disciple did likewise. And when the disciple opened his eyes,
Jesus was gone.
But the disciple knew where he had vanished to, because there was an inner, incredible lightness in his own being.
What do you think the disciple has to learn about eating popcorn? The down-and-out disciple calls Jesus a bittersweet experience. What do you think he meant by that? In this portrait of Jesus, what appeals to you and what puts you off? The kingdom of God is like yeast, which a woman took and kneaded into 3 measures of flour until the whole mass of dough began to rise. Now, 3 measures of flour is an awfully lot of flour. Any yeast that would make it rise must be tremendously powerful. The mother of soda bread knows what that yeast is.
Sarah had to have it, not just for herself. Her children, neighbors, and friends oohed and ahed over it, and everyone urged her to find out how to make it before it was too late. Her mother was getting up in years, and it would be a shame if it went with her. Sarah waited for the right moment and spoke with studied casualness.
Ma, mind if I watch you make soda bread and take a few notes?
Why should I? The next day, Ma gathered on the countertop all the ingredients necessary for her family and neighborhood-famous soda bread. Flour, sugar, raisins, butter, and a host of ancient spice bottles that were hidden deep in the cabinet. Then, with a deep intake of breath like a conductor the second before a symphony, she began. Sarah took copious notes. Each dab and pinch and sprinkle were scribbled on her yellow pad. Later on, looking over her jotting, she was puzzled by the entry H-D-E. Then she remembered. It was shorthand for
Hit dough with elbow.
For the truth was, abbreviations were needed. When her mother began to make the bread, she seemed to go into a trance. She moved about the kitchen gracefully, and her hands were as swift and precise as a concert pianist's. Sarah had all she could do to keep up. The next afternoon, Sarah had taped her notes to the cabinet door and began meticulously to follow the instructions. When she came to the part about elbowing the dough, she looked around the kitchen to make sure she was alone. She felt a little silly, but then delivered the dough a mighty blow. No pro basketball player ever threw a better elbow. That night at dinner, Sarah presented the bread with all the anxiety of a bride's first meal. Her family praised the soda bread extravagantly, but unanimously agreed that it
was not as good as Grandma's.
That made Sarah more determined than ever and sent her back for another note-taking session. The next afternoon, Ma began her ritual of baking. Everything was as Sarah had marked down. She could not see where she had gone wrong.
Ma, I did everything just as you did, but it didn't turn out the same.
You forgot the yeast.
You don't use yeast in soda bread.
Oh, you use yeast in everything.
I didn't see you use it.
When I was kneading the dough, I saw all the faces of the people who would be eating it. That yeast entered the dough and made it bread.
What are you? Some kind of a bread mystic?
Her mother smiled, but she did not deny it.
What is something your mother or father did that you always wanted to learn about? In the story, what do you think is the yeast that the mother of soda bread puts into the flour? And what do you think it has to do with the kingdom of God?